Hello, everyone, and welcome to Should I Stay or Should I Go? And today we're going to talk about another fun topic, and that is our liabilities. We are gathering our documents, getting things in order, getting our financial house in order. Last time we talked about our assets, and today we're just going to jump in to liabilities. And I'm joined with my fabulous co-host, Allison Jeffries. Hello, Allison.
Hey Elizabeth, how are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm good. So there's really not a whole lot to go deep on with this topic, but there are some really important things that I think women need to know as they're starting to get their ducks in a row and get their paperwork together. And I think that, while we want to talk about the different liabilities so you make sure that you don't forget one of them, there's also some nuances to uh, each one or to the type of liabilities and how they're held, who owns them, whether they're joint or individual. So, Allison, what do you think, like from the liability standpoint, what are the biggest things that you see people miss when you start working with them in your coaching program?
The first thing people do is they go to the obvious. What do I pay monthly? What are my monthly bills? Because when we think budget, that's what we think. What do we have outgoing on a monthly basis? And at the end of the day, it's those things that happen once a year or biannually, whether it's your car insurance, your homeowner's insurance, or other things that we forget about. The things that happen, we've got them set on autopilot, like I need to renew my website and that's going to cost some money. That's an annual cost that I wouldn't remember unless I went back through a whole year, maybe, of my bank statements to look at what has been coming out. Or if I sat down and thought, what are my annual obligations that I make once a year or twice a year, or even quarterly if you have quarterly obligations?
Yeah, I think those are great because it's so easy to think about, well, I've got my house, my car, and here's my list of credit cards. But it's those things that are not part of your every month routine that can be forgotten. And one of the things that I think we tend to forget is some of those expenses that come with the kids. Probably not things like daycare because you're paying that either weekly or monthly, but things like their activities. And gosh, today, some of these kids are in sports activities that actually have contracts and they're financially committed. And, even if they decide they don't like it and they want to quit, they've got to live out that contract. And I think that's one thing that could easily be missed if you're trying to put your list together. You're not thinking that as a typical liability.
And that's a really good call out because if we're thinking right now and they're in basketball, what happens in spring and they're playing on some kind of competitive team and it's, baseball, that can be very expensive and it comes at you. It's about kind of compartmentalizing life. Look at what are those expenses that you pay to live? The house. What about property taxes? Are they taken out of an escrow account or do you have to pay them at the end of the year? That's a big kicker that catches a lot of people. How about homeowners insurance? Is it escrowed? Do you pay it on an annual basis? How is it taken care of? Make sure that all of those expenses related to each part of your life. So if you take your life apart in chunks, the house, transportation, education and activities for the kids, you know, food and entertainment. What are those different areas of life that you want to make sure that you do that deep dive so you don't miss anything?
Yeah, that is so helpful because you could just probably ramble for a long period of time of all the what ifs and the different things that we all have in our life, the memberships and the subscriptions and the activities, and like you said, that even the entertainment. And we tend to not think of those when we think of liabilities or even expenses because we're like I said, we're thinking about those big things. And I think one thing, when you're going through a divorce, and hopefully you go through a mediation as opposed to a real nasty battle in court. But if you're going through a mediation, you're figuring out who's going to take ownership of that expense, who's going to cover it. And a lot of those oftentimes can be joint accounts. And the one area that I see a lot of people have major issues with down the road, like a year or 3 or 5 years down the road after the divorce, is they had this joint account and they decided that let's say the husband was going to take the Visa card and the husband was going to keep the house and make the payments. And he was supposed to remove her name, but he never did. And then something, terrible happened. He lost his job or got sick or something, and the income changed and he stopped making payments. As the spouse that doesn't have access to that house or that credit card or what have you, that the name is still on it and they're still contractually, legally obligated for that debt. And so then they go to do something, their credit gets pulled, and they only find out, when they're getting ready to do something, that there's all this negative stuff on their credit. And then they always say, but that's not mine. That was awarded to my husband in the divorce, so I'm not responsible. And unfortunately, yeah, you are. You're still responsible. So when you have joint accounts and you're divvying them up, one of the best things that you can do is have a really good agreement and plan as to how you're going to truly give that to the other person. Are they going to close the account and open a new one? Are they going to refinance the house? Are they going to refinance the car? What are they going to do to get your name off the liability? Because as long as that current liability is in its current state, its current form, and it's a joint account, you're still responsible. And that's the biggest thing that I see come back to bite people.
And that's a really big one. And one of the things I do with my clients is we start from day one. I set up a spreadsheet. And anytime they mention anything that sounds like assets, liabilities, whatever, put it on that spreadsheet. And just to make sure that my client has this in front of them, if it's something like a credit card, a car that might be in their name, the house that needs to be refinanced, I put an annotation off to the side. Something needs to be done here as soon as this divorce or before it's done. Something needs to be done with this particular asset, whether it goes to him or comes to you, but names need to be removed. Safety deposit boxes need to be closed out or names removed, all of those little things. And that way you've not only got your budget prepared, but you've got that list of to-do items so that you can go through and make sure you haven't forgotten something that's attached to one of these that needs to be either moved, closed, my name removed. If your name's on it, you can call and ask to have your name taken off. So, and sometimes they will, sometimes they won't. It just depends on where it is. But it's worth a phone call to even find out. And one of the things that I see with my clients that they forget in this whole budgeting process, which the purpose of it is so that you can go to mediation knowing what you need. What's going to take care of your ongoing expenses so post-divorce you can live comfortably. The thing my clients tend to forget is themselves. They'll remember all the stuff for the kids. They'll remember all the stuff for the house and the car and the insurance and all that good stuff. And then I'll say, well, how much do you spend on the kids' clothes a month? How much do you spend on the kids' shoes a month? How much do you spend on school supplies a year? What are these, expenses that you have for the kids? And then when I ask them about themselves, oh, well, how much do I add for clothes for myself? I literally had a client tell me she spent $100 a month on herself, and that was it, all inclusive. Now, I'm a girl. I know that isn't going to work. That just doesn't even cover anything, much less clothes and all of those things that we need on an ongoing basis. So
That
it's
doesn't
important
even
to
really
be
get you a
honest with
haircut, does
yourself.
it?
No, I was going to say that didn't even cover my hair care products. But anyway, yeah, it's you need to be honest with yourself. How much do you need to take care of yourself, to make sure you have clothes, to make sure you have all of the things that we as women have? That's not a frivolous expense. That's just part of who we are and how we live. And so we need to make sure we add those things into it. And with that, that comes vacations. You get your kids every summer for a couple of weeks so you can take them on vacation. If you haven't thought about what the cost of that vacation might be or where those monies are going to come from, you're going to spend 3 weeks at home with the kids, not on vacation. So it's about thinking ahead and really considering what in reality you would like to have. It doesn't mean you're going to get all of that or you're going to be able to do all of that. But if you don't include it from the beginning, you're not going to have it.
That's so true. And even if you aren't asking for those kind of things, you need to have the numbers, the information in your budget, so you understand, you have a real clear picture of what your spending plan is for the months and years ahead. And I know when I was raising kids, the last thing I wanted to do was sit home all summer long with them in the house. um, they went stir crazy and they drove me crazy. So you want to make sure you've got a vacation baked in there somewhere. So make sure you budget for it, build that into your plan, so that when you're sitting down and you're negotiating things, even though you may not be asking for any financial support for that, you at least know this is an expense I have, and therefore I need to make sure these other expenses have some contributions so that I can still do these things over here that I want to do, that is for a good family, balanced family life, because you want to have those things.
That's so true. It's about balance and having the wherewithal to know that you can do the things that you want to do with your kids and that you want to do as a family and not be stretched to do them because that's not
No, it's not. And of course, if you're talking about a family that's a dual income family, well, even if it's not, but right now you're living under one roof and you have one set of household expenses. And as you split up, you're going to have a set of household expenses. You're going to have the electricity and the cable and the internet and all that stuff. And so it does become more expensive. So that's even more reason to make sure that you have a game plan in place and you've got everything written out, uh, down to all those little kid activities and your haircut and everything else you want to do personally, so you know where you stand financially.
And there's one thing I want to bring up here, and it has to do with liabilities. It's a little off track, but I'm going to throw it in here. One of the things that I see with my clients, very, very common. First thing out of the gate, I want the house. I want the
Mhm.
house. This is my house. This is the house I've raised my children in. I want them to have that continuity of the home. I want the house without really considering the expense of that house. And like you said, two income family. Okay, now I'm going to one. Is that house payment going to be the thing that tips me over the top? And I understand at that point you're negotiating from the emotional standpoint of that is our home. But the reality is, as women go through this process, during the divorce negotiation, after the divorce is over, it doesn't take long. Most women actually consider selling the house within a year to 2 years, even if they can afford it. Whether it's, hey, this house has too many ghosts of the husband passed, or maybe we just need that fresh start as a family. So there they have, they've given up retirement dollars, they've given up, whatever else they've given up to get that house. And now they're 6 months to a year beyond that divorce, and they're realizing, I don't really want this house anymore. So what I'd suggest is that as you're going through that idea of if I get divorced, I want this, and this is what I need, think about it. from the long-term perspective?
I
Is
couldn't
there
agree
some
with you
place that
more.
might be better for you?
I've seen that happen so many times that the woman will fight tooth and nail for the house and give up other assets just so she can hold on to that house. And then that house ended up being a money pit. I remember I've seen that once before. It was a money pit. She couldn't sell it. She couldn't get rid of it because it was overdeveloped for the neighborhood. So it took a long time to sell. And when she did, she had to drop her price. And all the while, she's trying to maintain, do all the maintenance on the house and keep it up and spend the money to maintain it. And had she just agreed, hey, yeah, let's just sell it and let's split the equity and be on, with our life, she would have had not only the equity dollars, but she probably would have had some other assets because she wasn't having to pay him his equity portion of the house. So I've just seen that happen so many times, just like you laid it out, Allison. And they regret it later. And it's not as important as they thought it was.
Yeah, that's one of those things that, and it's kind of like going into this divorce with, I want primary custody, I want full custody of my kids. I want him to have that every other weekend, and I want full child support. And by the time we're done, amazingly, maybe it is joint custody. And maybe the child support is a lot less than it would have been had she had full custody, but it's what was right for the kids. And the kids are happier. And quite frankly, my clients find out that now that they're single, having that full-time responsibility of caring for and paying for everything for their kids is a little bit bigger than she wanted. And it does become daunting and scary. Whereas stepping back from the whole picture of what I want today and looking at where will I be 2 years, 3 years, 4 years down the road and what will be better for everyone, you become less attached to the things from the emotional standpoint, and you become more realistic about what will be good for you. And believe it or not, the majority of my clients, by the time it's done, they're actually very happy with joint custody and with having that time to themselves and then having the quality time with their kids so that they're not always the bad parents. They get to be the good parents sometimes too.
A great point. I remember those days. Is there
Yeah.
anything else that you can think of? Because I'm kind of scrolling through my mind, and we've hit on the big topics. We've talked about ownership and understanding that if we don't refinance it or transfer it get it out of our name, that we're still responsible. We're talking about the kids' expenses, the self-care expenses, and all those annual things that we often don't think about because they come once a year. Can you think of anything else, Allison, that we need to be getting our arms around as far as expenses?
You know, that's the problem is there's so many things that we forget. The idea behind this is I would say take a measured approach to filling this out and completing it. It's not something you're going to sit down, write it all down and be done. It needs to be a living document that as things come up. You have to think about we've got co-pays on the health insurance and we've got all the other things that can come up. And just keep adding to it and adding to it as you go. So that when you get to that point where you're ready for mediation or you're settling the divorce, you've got a complete picture. But just know you're not going to have a complete picture right off the bat. You are going to remember things that come up or that get added. Because now you've got a kid who's turning 16 and you've got car insurance. Think about the things that are going to be added in the future. What about, and one of the things that people always forget is I've got a 12, 13, 14-year-old kid. Well, are they going to get a car? Who's going to pay the car insurance? Who's going
Another
to pay
one
for the
I've
car?
seen, the one I've seen is like what happens once the child turns 18 and they decide to go off to school, to college. And it may be that the parents have already said, oh, well, we've got a college fund. Okay, well, what is that college fund going to cover? Is it going to cover their meals? Is it going to cover their day-to-day expenses? And if not, who's going to be the parent that provides that? Or how are we going to do that? Are we going to make them get a job? So it is, you really have to be looking into the future and thinking ahead, and answering all those little quirky questions that otherwise you might not have to think about right now, but you need to think about them because they will come up. And is child
The
support
most
going to
important,
continue? Is it going to continue beyond 18? If it is, you have to figure all that out now because it has to be put in the decree. Otherwise, it ends at 18 or as soon as they graduate high school. So if they graduate high school at 18 and a half, then it goes through 18 and a half. But just all those little moving parts that can sneak up and bite us if we're not prepared.
yes. And the important thing is just to realize we can't be prepared for every emergency or every eventuality, but we can be prepared to have a good comprehensive overview of what we need to live and what is out there. And right now, that's really all we're trying to accomplish is not come up with what the end result is of your divorce, what you're going to ask for in mediation, but just getting you a baseline knowledge of what's out there and what you're going to be faced with or could be faced with and what your options are. Because there are no right and wrong answers here. It's about you figuring out what works for you, your children, and your family.
Exactly. And if you haven't listened to the call before, the conversation, I should say, that we did before this, we talked about assets. And before that, we talked about just gathering all the documents that you'll need. So be sure to go back and take a listen to those too, as you're getting all your ducks in a row. Well, Allison, I don't have any more. Is there anything else you can think before we sign off?
No, but I just want to thank everybody for listening to us today, talk about your liabilities, and would encourage all of you while you're at our YouTube site. If you haven't listened to the earlier videos, go ahead and listen. You might pick up something there. Subscribe, ring the bell so you get notified when we have upcoming episodes coming out, as well as if you've got friends that maybe could use this information. We'd encourage you to share this with them. That gives you someone that you can talk to about what you're doing. Maybe support each other through the process a little bit more. And we all know it's that community of women that get us through when we're going through the hard times. So we encourage you to share what you can and lean on your friends and hopefully have someone that you can talk to as you work through this that will help you.
Those are words of wisdom right there, because that's probably one of the most important things you can have is that those trusted friends that will help you through these challenging times. Well, I guess with that, Allison, we will sign off till next week, and forgot what we're talking about next week. Insurance or something like that. I can't remember, but you got to come back and join us.
Well, we
So,
look forward to seeing everyone next week.
yeah, thanks everyone. See you next time.